Okay, hello everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us at the CTA's RPM Virtual Town Hall. We're going to give it 2 more minutes before we actually start to allow attendees to come into the meeting. In the meantime, we're going to be showing just a page on our contact information, website, email, and how to sign up for RPM alerts. So we'll go to that slide and we'll start in about a minute and a half now. Okay, we're coming on about 2 minutes, so I think we're going to get started. Welcome everyone. This is CTA's Lawrence to Bryn Mawr Modernization Virtual Town Hall. We're really excited about this because this is only the second time that CTA's RPM team has done a virtual public meeting. We are just coming off last week. We did our first one for the Red Purple Bypass area down in Lakeview. So we're excited to be continuing with this way of engagement. Of course, these are really hard times for the world and for the city. So we're doing what we can to stay engaged with the community. And this, of course, is a part of that so that we can talk about upcoming information for projects and construction work that's happening in the community and the associated impacts. So my name's Jesse Thomas. I work in community outreach for CTA's RPM project, and I'll be moderating this town hall. Before we get started, I'm going to take a moment to explain about how it will work. First of all, as you can see, we have live sign language interpretation being provided. So big thanks to our interpreters helping us out with that. This meeting is also going to be recorded and translated into other languages. Chinese, Vietnamese, and Spanish will be provided and afterwards be posted on our website along with the English recording that we're doing. So we're going to have a presentation from some of the leadership of CTA's RPM project, and then we're going to have 15 minutes to do a Q&A session. Some of you have already submitted questions through the registration page where you could put in a question. We're going to be going through those, and then also you have the opportunity to ask a question here during the meeting through the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button. You can click on that and type in another or a question, and we'll be getting to as many as we can during the 15-minute period with our question and answer panel. If we're not able to get to your question, don't worry, we will be going through all of them and then posting them on our website in about a week or so. So that's how the question and answer portion will work. So yeah, before we go to the presentation itself, we have a couple special guests with us. We're going to hear from 2 aldermen of the wards where the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr Modernization work is taking place. So first, Alderman Cappleman of the 46th ward, and then we'll hear from Alderman Osterman from the 48th ward. So I'm going to turn it to you, Alderman Cappleman, if you could have your video on.
Thank you. And welcome everyone. This is some very, very exciting times. I am standing virtually right in front of the Wilson L that was rehabbed about 3 years ago. the change that this brought forth to the Uptown community was transformational. The impact was blew all my expectations, and so that's why I believe that our next step with this red purple line modernization from Lawrence all the way up to Bryn Mawr is also going to be transformational as well. Now, I'll be honest with you, it was rough at times because construction projects are never fun. The good news is we learned so much about what it takes to rehab an L, the Wilson L, and we're going to use all that knowledge to help with this process. So I look forward to working with all of you and Alderman Osterman. We're going to make this happen. Some very, very exciting times are ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alderman. Thanks for that perspective on Wilson Station as well. So I'll turn it to Alderman Osterman of the 48th Ward. Get your video on.
Video's on. No cool backdrop like my colleague Alderman Cappleman. I want to welcome everyone for this meeting tonight, and hope that all of you are being safe and protecting yourself from COVID. For all of you that have been in our community for some time, you know that this has been a project we've been working on for over 10 years. And now we are at the point where the heavy work is going to begin. Our goal is to make sure that there's a lot of communication with you about how the construction is going to go. Our goal is to make sure that we support the business community through this heavy construction project, so that the businesses that support our neighborhood can continue to thrive, and their workers continue to work during this project. This is going to be massive disruption, and I don't want to sugarcoat it, but together we're going to get through it. And when we get through with the construction project, I think it's going to have a profound impact on our neighborhood for the next 50 years. So I ask for your patience. I ask for your communication. If you don't get questions answered tonight, please feel free to email me at harry@48th Ward, and we'll make sure that we get the answers to your questions. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Alderman. Just me, but I thought your background was pretty cool. All right, so we can go to the next slide for our agenda. So we will be hearing from, like I mentioned, some of the leadership of the RPM team. So first we'll be hearing from Chris Bushell. He's the RPM project executive. He'll be going through some of the overhead information about the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr modernization project. Second, we'll be hearing from Steve Hands. He's a senior manager for the RPM project. He'll be talking about construction progress and impacts that are upcoming. We'll go back to Chris to get some information about the stations that's very important for everyone to understand, and updates in that area. And then Tammy Chase, the Director of Communications for RPM, will take us through business support. At that point, we will go to the Q&A session. So we can start with our presentation. I'll send it over to you, Chris. There you are.
Thank you, Jesse. Picking up where Alderman Osterman left off, if we could go to the next slide. It's time to rebuild. We have been working on this for 10 years. Your aldermen have been integral to the process, as well as the mayor of the city of Chicago and the president of the CTA. All are committed to replacing your 100-year-old stations with brand new infrastructure. This isn't a rehab or a fixing of an existing end-of-life station. These are brand new structure and brand new stations that will provide, I think, transportation and safety for the next 100 years to this community. So we're really pleased to be able to do it. We have, the new stations will be with wider platforms. They'll have better lighting. They'll be safer, and they will be completely accessible. An important part of this project and the improvements that we're bringing to your community. Next slide, please. So construction approach and schedule. The pre-stage or pre-work that's indicated here for 2019 and 2020 is really to set up the tracks in such a way that we can come in 2 subsequent stages and build half of the new structure and stations on the east half of the tracks from 2020 through 2022, and then subsequently the west half of the tracks once the east half is done and we can run service on them. So if those of you that watched Wilson sort of noticed how we built, in that case, 1 track at a time or 1 platform at a time, or even half a platform at a time, and you'll see a similarly incremental process here. And it's really to build this station while we're also providing service is one of the reasons for the cost of the project, and it's one of the reasons for the duration of this schedule. It is a dense urban context, and we will continue to provide the same level of service to you throughout the construction. Same level of transit service. If you can, please go to the next slide. So the project map. The pre-stage construction is predominantly 2 interlockings. One that we just got done installing at Montrose. Thank you very much, Alderman Cappleman. And another that we'll be installing at Thorndale and working very closely with Alderman Osterman. It also involves some signal and systems work that I won't get into too much detail on, but all of it important so that we can move trains from one set of tracks to the other and build on the opposite side. In addition, we also have temporary station construction at Argyle and Bryn Mawr, and then as I showed you on the schedule before, the 2 stages of construction for the bridge and the stations underneath it from late 2020 to 2024. Could we go to the next slide? So with that, for some more details on the upcoming work at Thorndale, I'd like to turn it over to Jesse.
Thanks, Chris, for taking us through some of those basics. And yeah, as Chris said, Steve, you will be going through some of the upcoming construction progress and the impact. So go ahead, Steve.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's really exciting to talk to you a little bit about the progress that we've been making on the project. Quite a bit is going on. We can move to the next slide to go through some of the work that's been done. As Chris noted, back in June, we did work on the Montrose interlocking, several weeks of work to set that interlocking in place right around Montrose Avenue. We continue to work on utility relocations, which we've done over the last few years, and we will be complete with the advanced utility relocation later this year. So thank you for bearing with us with that project. In addition, in preparation for our temporary stations, the demolition of the former Toyota dealership building on Broadway Avenue just north of Bryn Mawr was completed a few weeks ago, and that's allowed our contractor to start construction on the temporary stations that will provide access at Bryn Mawr and Argyle. What we're really going to focus on today is the Thorndale interlocking work that's going to be starting this Friday, July 17th. As well as we'll continue to see continued preparatory track work until the start of Stage A. So in addition to Thorndale, you'll continue to see, as Chris noted, track work and signal work to prepare us to go into that construction phase when we move all the trains over to 2 tracks to build the next, the other structure. That Stage A, as we call it, is scheduled to begin in 2021. And associated with that, we continue to develop our design plans, including those for stations. And we'll touch on that a little bit later in this meeting on the progress of our design plans. Next slide. Again, just focusing on some of the preparatory work that we're doing this year for what we call that pre-stage. We have the 2 interlockings at Montrose and Thorndale. The Montrose one, again, was completed over a series of weeks in June. And again, we're starting the Thorndale interlocking, a 4-week process this Friday. In addition, we continue to work on other wall repairs and track work along the corridor between those 2 interlockings and the temporary stations at our temporary station entrances at Argyle and Bryn Mawr. Next slide. We've used the term interlocking here, and I understand that that's a phrase that's common to us in the railroad industry, but obviously we should do a little bit more explaining here. this picture shows the work underway at Montrose for the interlocking a few weeks ago. And you can see from this image how the tracks, a new set of rails is installed so that you can move from one track to the next. So in addition to the rails, there's also electric power work that is necessary to move the trains from one track to the other, as well as the signaling infrastructure that Chris noted earlier in the presentation. So this interlocking is a series of the track infrastructure, power, and signal that allows us to move trains from one track to the next. It will allow us to combine red and purple line train services from their current 4-track corridor down to 2 tracks, so we can free up the other 2 tracks for construction during the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr modernization period. So that's kind of why we talk about interlockings. It's a very important aspect of the preparatory work necessary to move into the next phase of construction. And that's what we're really going to focus on today under this conversation. We can move into the next slide, please. So we're going to touch a little bit on the community impacts and mitigations of the next major aspect of work. So again, we're going to touch on this Thorndale interlocking 4-week period coming up starting this Friday. This slide really lays out what the schedule is going to look like for this work. Generally, the service impacts are focused on Granville, Thorndale, and Bryn Mawr stations. And I'll walk through this a little bit. If you're looking for more detail, the service alerts are available on our website at transchicago.com. You can go there and learn exactly about what time everything starts and the alternative service available. But I'll walk through again, starting this weekend. There will be station closures at Granville, Thorndale, and Bryn Mawr. During that period, there will be bus shuttles provided that will connect you from Loyola and all 3 stations that are closed to Berwyn. So you'll be able to access the red line again at Loyola and Berwyn, and the bus shuttle will provide service in between. On Monday and the following 2 weeks, between July 20th and the 31st, there will be no Howard-bound stops at those 3 stations, Granville, Thorndale, and Bryn Mawr. And so if you need to access those stations and go towards Howard or northbound, you'll have to take a southbound train to Berwyn and transfer to a northbound train to move forward. In the middle of this reroute on August, the Thorndale work on August 1st and 2nd, again, we'll have those same 3 station closures at Granville, Thorndale, and Bryn Mawr. And then the next 2 weeks, we'll work on the other half of the interlocking between August 3rd and 14th, where there will be no 95th bound stops at the Granville, Thorndale, and Bryn Mawr. And then the final weekend, August 15th through 16th, again, those 3 stations will be closed, and we'll be providing that bus shuttle, again, whenever those 3 stations are closed in both directions. During this period, we'll also have purple lines on the same tracks as the red line through this area. So if you're a purple line customer, you will see the travel time increase for that trip. We can move on to the next slide. So again, normally when we do this type of construction, we have to do it on weekends. For this complicated work at Thorndale, it would have required over 1/3 of all weekends in 2020 to have impacts, including significant back rides for up to 9 stations in a row. So 9 stations in a row would be affected at a time. This would have been a lot of weekends of impacts to the community as well as our customers. With this approach that we're moving forward with starting this Friday, again, it's 4 weeks of modified red and purple line service, but it does allow for fewer weekends to be impacted this year, less night work overall, and less associated noise impacts overnight, and fewer days when we're moving equipment and trucks back and forth through the community, concentrating it again in this 4-week period. And also it has fewer impacts during street closures because of that period as well for the Thorndale work. That's not to say there won't be impacts, and that's why we include this slide. Obviously, to do this work, it does require a lot of attention from the contractor, and so work will be necessary around the clock 24/7 during this period. There will still be noise associated with the construction, but we will try to minimize the overnight noise. Due to this longer period, we'll be able to reduce the overnight noise work that's happening. There will be nighttime lights when overnight work is required, and you will see dust associated with the construction as well as the street and alley closures concentrated in the the Ardmore area. We can move to the next slide. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jesse to talk a little bit about station updates coming forward.
Great. Chris is going to be talking about that, some important information about the station specifically. Chris.
All right, thank you very much. If we could go to the next slide. So many of you are curious as to when your stations will be impacted. So we will be closing stations in 2021 and reopen them again in 2024. Understanding, of course, on the second bullet point, which is there will be temporary stations opened at Bryn Mawr and Argyle. Steve talked a little bit about some of the demolition at Toyota, which will be part of the Bryn Mawr station. We are generally, because we're reconstructing the entire structure and stations from the ground up, this is not a rehab, we do need to close the existing stations. And there aren't a lot of places to put temporary stations in this area, but we've been able to work with the aldermen in the community to find some locations in and around Bryn Mawr and Argyle to be able to do those temp stations so that you'll have service during the construction. And then my last point, everyone is really curious to see the new station designs. We will unveil them this year. We are in the process of working through those designs in a virtual environment. Due to COVID, we have been able to minimize the delays associated with this project by moving most of our events to video conferencing or other types of tools to be able to move the design forward. So we look forward to previewing those designs with the community this year. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Jesse.
Thanks, Chris. Lastly, we will be hearing from Tammy Chase, Director of Communications and RPM. She'll be talking about business support in the area associated with the project. Tammy.
Thank you, Jesse, and thanks to everyone who is here with us on this beautiful summer night. So you've heard a lot from my colleagues Steve and Chris about prep work for major construction starting next year. That is similar to what we're doing with the Open for Business program. Years back when we first announced phase one, we understood that a lot of hundreds, in fact, of small businesses are in the footprint of our red line tracks and would be affected by the construction, but particularly access to their businesses, etc. So this has been a big collaborative effort, I'd say the last several years, with the local alderman's offices, as well as the local chambers, and in particular small businesses themselves. We have gone out and had dozens and dozens of conversations. What is it you guys need us to do to support? So next slide, please. And as we had these conversations, then obviously came along a pandemic, which hammered on small businesses even more, making this program and this effort and the support that CTA will provide even more important than ever. So our Open for Business program basically is to drive foot traffic into the community, making sure that people in the community as well as outside of the community know, hey, we're open for business. Come eat, come shop, come play in our community. It's very hyper focused, so it's very much focused on Uptown, on Edgewater, on East Lakeview down in the bypass area, and on Andersonville as well. Again, one of the greatest things about our city is the local businesses and the local neighborhoods, and so that's a big part of what we're doing. The next big piece of this will be registering businesses later this summer into the fall, getting them to register for this free program. That means that they can participate in all of our social media promotion, events, be a part of a really cool web portal that we'll create that is all about businesses, all about events in the communities to promote local. So we'll be looking for that. Additional pieces of the Open for Business program will include new creative materials, signage, digital marketing, and as I mentioned, that a special web portal that we're really excited about and we look forward to rolling out later this year. A couple other things I want to mention along this vein. We will be driving foot traffic in part because we'll have a lot more project employees in the community. Walsh Floor, our contractor, will be opening a project site office later this year in the old bank building at Broadway and Thorndale. In addition, we'll be opening a community project storefront, dictated a little bit like what's going on with COVID, of course, in terms of timing, but we want to have a place for the community to feel that they can go and get information, get tours, etc. And finally, I want to mention that later this summer into the fall, we will be hosting or co-hosting events that provide information about workforce opportunities that are associated with this project in the local community. So stay tuned for all of those things coming forth. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jesse.
All right, thanks Tammy for taking us through the business support. All right, well that concludes our presentation portion. We're going to move to our Q&A. Like I mentioned, we'll spend 15 minutes on this. You can see your view changing. I'll ask all the panelists who are on the Q&A to turn their videos on. I'll introduce a couple new people. Okay, seeing a couple. Joining the people who have already spoken in the presentation will be Jeff Wilson. He is the Director of Government and Community Relations. So welcome, Jeff. And then also joining us is Rob Cheeseman. He's a project manager for the contractor, Walsh Floor. So they will be bringing their expertise as well to this panel. So we have been getting questions as the presentation's been going on, and then like I mentioned, we already have the questions that people asked while registering. So I'm going to start going down. We'll get through as many as we can in the time we have. So the first question I have is for you, Chris. It's back to COVID, which you have mentioned a little bit. How has the schedule changed due to COVID? Could future closures take place now when fewer people are traveling on CTA?
Well, and that is really one of the logic behind doing some of the extended reroutes that we're starting this Friday to do the Thorndale work. As Steve mentioned before, we would ordinarily do this work on weekends, but we can do it more efficiently in this time period. And with the COVID ridership, it gives us an opportunity to do some different things with construction. So, we're pretty pleased to be able to take those opportunities while we're, of course, extremely concerned with the safety of the community and the contractor working on the job. So, yeah, we are going to be looking at that. We have, I think, by working collaboratively with the contractor, minimized the impacts associated with COVID. We have been able to move pretty quickly to a virtual environment for design, and then at the same time focus on employee and community safety with our local workforce. And I want to call out Rob and his team for doing an exceptional job in minimizing those delays. I mean, there have been some for sure, right? No one's life has remained the same, but we've tried to adapt to it. And technology, thankfully, is there. I mean, as you can see really from what we're doing here with this community meeting, I didn't use a lot of video conferencing before COVID. Now I use it every day. So we've done the same thing on the project to move it forward.
Thanks, Chris. All right, the next question, I'm going to keep it with you, Chris. Why did CTA spend money renovating some of these stations in 2012 just to have it completely rebuilt less than 10 years later?
Well, I think many people in the community could answer that question pretty well. The stations desperately needed to be repaired, even though they were end of service life. And at the same time we repaired them, we engaged with your aldermen and the community on what the vision was to replace it. And it ultimately landed us here with a lot of hard work in the position where we could completely replace it. So the conditions at that time were tough to ignore. We wanted to address them and keep the stations operating and safe. At the same time, we worked really, really hard to bring you this project. Again, no one worked harder than your alderman, the mayor of the city of Chicago, as well as the head of the CTA.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, I'll send this to Steve. Will the purple line be making all red line stops during the Thorndale work?
It's not expected that it will be stopping at red line stations. It will continue to run as an express service. It will just be sharing the tracks, and so it may still run slower than it does normally today when it has its own set of tracks.
All right. Next one I'll send to Jeff Wilson. Is there a point person available for emergencies 24/7? Who will it be, or how should I contact someone for emergencies?
So yes, we're in the process of actually setting a phone hotline up for emergency phone calls. While the phone line won't be operational 24/7, we will plan on getting back to people ASAP. If it's in a dire emergency, obviously we ask people to dial 911, but there will be a hotline number provided.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Next question brings us to the stations. I'll send this to Steve, excuse me. Will the new stations and platform designs be reflected of their communities, such as the Historic District and the Argyle Pagoda?
So it's very important that the stations are reflective of their communities. We're really lucky to have in Uptown and Edgewater 3 historic districts that this project travels through: the Uptown Square Historic District at Lawrence, the West Argyle Historic District at Argyle, and the Bryn Mawr Historic District as well. And so the station designs have to be within context of those historic districts. Obviously, they will be new, modern stations, but they'll be designed to be complementary to those historic districts. Obviously, Argyle has the added wonderful culture that it presents, and the pagoda is part of that. And so we're definitely looking to bring a station design that's going to be reflective of that community and compatible with the historic district.
Great, thank you. All right, the next question will go to Tammy. How can we learn more about the Open for Business program?
We will use a number of ways to let people know what's coming. We'll have a separate, just small business and chamber of commerce outreach, some virtual meetings, so forth, to let them know. We will be communicating to our RPM email subscribers as well. So if you don't already get those emails, please do sign up. That information is available at the end of this presentation. And we will be also, of course, working with the local aldermen in the 46th and 48th wards, and they will be communicating our information through their newsletters and normal communications. So there's a lot of ways to find out what's going on.
Great. Next question I have is, and I'm sorry, this will go to Chris. Will the new tracks have additional overhead clearances at Thorndale?
Well, we look forward to building the next phase of this project, but the current phase will end south of Thorndale in the area of the new interlocking we're installing. So unfortunately, the station and the bridge over Thorndale will not be increased at this time. But again, we're hoping for future phases, and that would certainly be work that would be included.
Okay, great. This one is about parking. I'll send this to you, Rob. Where will alternate parking be located for displaced parkers?
It's a hard question to answer to a specific address at this time, but our goal is to keep it as close to their current location as possible within the alignment. We're working with the alderman and CTA to identify available spots as the schedule arises, and then our goal is to keep the displaced parkers as close to their current residence as possible.
All right, thanks, Rob. Next question, we were getting a lot of questions about the parking. We're also getting more questions about stations closing. Steve, if you could address this next one. When the stations, Lawrence, Argyle, Berwyn, and Bryn Mawr close, when will they close, and will the temporary stations be in the same place that the current stations or nearby?
It's a great question. So the temporary stations will be opening at the same time as the stations close, and so there won't be a big gap between when those stations close and when the new temporary stations open. That's going to occur in 2021. Again, as Tammy said, please sign up for our alerts. You will continue to get updates in advance of when exactly that's going to occur. We'll be providing information way long in advance before the actual closures. So please sign up to those alerts. If you go to our website now, you can see some of our outlooks for upcoming construction. You can also look for those going forward. In terms of the location of the temporary stations, they will shift compared to where they are today in some cases. Again, on our website, there is information about the temporary station coming up for Stage A, but I'll just go quickly through it. At Bryn Mawr, you will have two separate entrances, one for southbound customers and one for northbound customers. There will be lots of signage to direct people to where they're supposed to go, and we'll be providing that in advance. And there's diagrams on our website about how that station will be laid out. At Argyle for the temporary station, the entrance will be just right next to where the current entrance is during this first Stage A, again, starting in 2021. And so that will be very easy for customers to access that station there.
Thanks, Steve. I just got another one that is applicable, so I'll keep it on you. Will the platforms of the stations be wider?
Of course, the new stations, the permanent stations that Chris talked about, the real need for this project, they will be a wider platform. We need to expand those platforms to accommodate new elevators and wider staircases and escalators for our customers. So currently they're around 12 feet wide, and the new stations will be about 22 feet wide, so a full 10 feet wider than today. For the temporary stations, there will be two platforms instead of one platform. And so while the platforms may not be any wider than today, there will be more capacity overall for those temporary stations because there will be a platform for southbound customers and a separate platform for northbound customers.
All right, thanks, Steve. This one I will send over to Chris. How much will the tracks be raised? And I'm assuming that means once the work is done.
Yeah, differing amounts in differing areas. This is sort of a sticky wicket of a question. Generally speaking, they'll be raised. We'll have fewer columns in the streets. There'll be better sight lines throughout the area. But at kind of the beginning of the bridge, the height will be one thing, and at the end, in the middle, it'll be something else. So the answer changes a little bit based on where you are. But as Steve mentioned before, we are still designing this in scale to the neighborhood, in particular the stations. So I don't think at the end of the day, other than the convenience of better sightline in these bridges, that many folks in the community will really notice a significant difference beyond more light and a safer environment.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I'll keep it on you for another question. Why is the project going to take so long? Why can't stations stay open like Wilson did during construction?
That's a good question. Wilson, we had a little more space at Wilson, a little more real estate to do a gradual movement. You will notice, though, at Wilson, the station wasn't in the same exact place that it is today. Stations both moved a little bit, and in moving, they weren't in the same place, I guess is the easy thing to say. So we had a little more space at Wilson to move around. We didn't need to move any of the temp stations off-site, and we had a little bit more room to move around. In the case of the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr segment, it's a little tighter. There are fewer options for us. We were able to work closely within the community and find locations for two of the stations. In terms of the length of the project, the real complicating thing is that we're building it in two sections, half and half. Building half a station, building half a bridge is complicated. It increases the duration of the whole effort and the cost, but it's ultimately necessary to keep the service going. So service is one of the most important things to this project. We are going to continue to run the Red Line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is important to us to maintain the ability of our customers to have service during construction. That complicates the effort. It makes it more expensive. But nonetheless, we think it's the best thing for the community, and we've heard from everybody for 10 years about how important that is. So it does add costs and it does add schedule. But we're doing our best to accelerate it where we can, doing stuff like this piece of work at Thorndale. Instead of over a bunch of weekends, we're concentrating it in this reroute and trying to bring better value to the project and the community.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We're getting short on time. We'll do a couple more questions. This one I'll send to Steve. How will rail and bus service change once the stations close, especially for Berwyn and Lawrence buses?
So the buses that currently serve Lawrence and Berwyn will be rerouted to serve one of the open stations during the time period when we're in that temporary station layout. As Chris noted, for rail service, one of the reasons why we're investing in these interlockings and building the project in halves is so that we can maintain rail service through the duration of this construction project. So rail service will continue to operate as Chris noted, but we do intend to reroute the buses as necessary so that they do connect to an open red line station throughout the life of the project.
All right, thanks. We'll do one more question. I'll keep it on you, Steve. Will the Thorndale interlocking be permanent after the project is done? And how do these interlockings benefit riders after the project ends?
So after the project is done, the Thorndale interlocking will remain in place and we'll continue to use it at CTA for operations. One of the things that the interlocking allows us to do, again, is to move trains from one track to the other. So if we ever have to do maintenance work, it allows us to do that maintenance work more efficiently and to have fewer impacts on our customers when we reroute trains to alternative tracks. It also provides some flexibility for our operations. If there's ever an incident, we can use that interlocking to move trains from one track to the other to get around a stalled train so that we can maintain service for our customers. Currently, this corridor with the 4 tracks, we have minimal interlockings and it does hamper our ability to provide service. With RPM Phase 1, again, we're building these 2 brand new interlockings at Thorndale and Montrose, and we'll also have another interlocking as part of the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr Modernization project, and that will really provide some new flexibility to our service.
Okay, thanks, Steve. That's going to round us out, and we'll finish up the question and answer time now. So thank you so much for the panel, taking some of the questions. Like I mentioned, if we did not get to your question, we are going to do a full Q&A up on our website and provide answers after this meeting along with the recordings. So links to that question and answer and the presentation itself and a brief survey are all going to be sent out to the attendees of this meeting via email, so please keep an eye out for that. And then once again, here is our contact information. So be sure to get more information at our website, email questions or concerns that you may have at rpm@transitchicago.com. And cannot emphasize enough, please sign up for alerts if you have not done so already. This is where you can customize the kinds of alerts you get based on your location and what stations you use. And this is how you get all of the information that we have for the public. So, and then of course, new social media channels are on the way as well for RPM. So thank you everyone for taking time. Thank you to our panelists, presenters. Thank you to the alderman for joining us, and for all CTA customers and community members for being here with us tonight. We hope this was informational and helpful. So please stay in touch, and hope you have a great evening. Take care.